What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 16th, 2018, middle of the week, hump day, starting at long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. Ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. So let's get right on into it. I'm going to lead off here with our volcano because that's certainly around here, that's the big story. The U.S. Geological Survey and the Hawaii Volcanoes Observatory have moved the Big Island from condition orange to condition red as of last night. And Claire and I did a little shopping at Safeway yesterday. We walked on in and there it was on the news rack, condition red. Because things are getting really serious. Now, what the condition red means is they think that a massive explosive eruption is imminent, could happen at any time. And last night, every little shake of the building, I woke right up here, which is kind of like how I used to live when we were in Southern California, especially after that Northridge earthquake. Every little shake would just, wake us up. So we're very concerned about that. But apparently the ash plume coming out of the Kilauea crater is now 12,000 feet high. And it's still not possible to see it from this island. I mean, if we drove over to Hawaii Kai on a really clear day, we can see the tips of Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea poking up over the horizon. Can't see most of the island because of the curvature of the earth. But those mountains are 14,000 feet high. But if this thing really lets go, it may be possible to actually see it from here. And in that case, I will definitely drive on over and get some pictures here. So we've had an ongoing eruption for 10 days. 2,000 residents have been evacuated. A lot of homes have been destroyed. Great concern that a lot of people in homes could be cut off as the lava is approaching the last road into the area. It's already basically closed off several of the roads into there, but if you look at a map of the roads into that part of the island, there's really only one main road down from Hilo into that part of the island, and it splits into a couple of roads. One of them is basically a dirt road that goes along that south shore, and that's the one that is about to be cut off here. But the U.S. Geological Survey is basically saying it's condition red, the highest level, indicating a major volcanic eruption is imminent. And so this is really very serious. This is the largest eruption in a very, very long time. And it looks like it is going to get worse. Madam Pelly's definitely having a bad day here. At this point, there is so much ash in the air that flights into Hilo and even Kailua Kona are being called off because you don't want to fly a jet aircraft through an ash cloud. Now, a lot of people, they think ash, they think what you have left over in your fireplace after you burn wood or newspapers. It's totally different. Volcanic ash is actually very tiny particles of glass. And you don't want to breathe it in because it will lacerate your lungs, and you don't want to get it into a jet engine because it will literally remelt in the heat of the engine and start to coat the turbine blades. And that'll throw the turbine off of balance, and you could have blades breaking off and a rotor burst. There have been incidents where planes have flown through ash clouds of volcanoes that have erupted just before they got there, and so there was no warning. It'll literally sandblast the paint off the front of the aircraft, all the leading edges. There was one case where a plane literally had the cockpit windows just sandblasted to the point where you couldn't see through them, and the pilot actually had to land the plane by looking out the side window and looking at the runway markers. So it is a very, very serious situation. Now, as I mentioned before, that volcano is one of Hawaii's big tourist attractions, and they're trying to keep the tourists out of there who really should know better. And it is a bit of a tragedy that, when you're down there at Volcanoes National Park and you see the sawhorses set up with a rope and a little sign on it saying, don't go beyond this point, it's not there for decoration. Because what's on the far side of that rope may look like the lava you're standing on now, but usually it's just a thin, cooled crust over an active lava flow. And every year we have about 12 people who will step across that rope to get a selfie or something, and they'll just plunge on through, and that's the last anybody ever sees of them. So it is a live volcano. And unfortunately, some entrepreneurs, opportunists, decided they were going to hold impromptu lava tours by putting tourists on their boats and basically sailing around the southern coast of the volcano so people could see the lava pouring into the ocean. And they did not have the appropriate permit, so they have been fined and stopped. Because to get a permit, you have to go through special training to know what is and is not safe to do around an active lava flow. So if you are on the Big Island right now, if you are a tourist, please play it very, very safe. If you really feel that you want to go see the active volcano, there are licensed and permitted tours that are in operation. There were helicopter tours. I imagine they're grounded by the ash right now as well. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, the global repercussions from Bloody Monday are continuing, and the outrage around the world at what Israel did to those Palestinian protesters in Gaza continues to be expressed, continues to grow, along with outrage at the corporate media and the governments of Israel and the United States for trying to somehow spin this as all the fault of the Palestinians, and those poor Israelis were only defending themselves. But there was an article that came out of Counterpunch. The headline says it all: kill and kill and kill. Because basically what you had on Bloody Monday, you had Israeli army snipers in fortified positions shooting and killing 58 Palestinians, including 6 children, and injuring almost 3,000 others. It was tear gas, incendiary devices dropped onto their camps. And at the same time, of course, you had champagne glasses at a glittering reception 50 miles away in Jerusalem. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump presiding over the opening of the new embassy there. And the juxtaposition of these two images has stuck in people's mind around the world as just how callous Israel and the U.S. government have been toward the Palestinian people all this time. Another article coming out of zcom.org. Gaza, grief, horror, outrage, remembering. This one is not going to go away. I remember when this started happening a few weeks ago, I equated what Israel was doing to the Palestinians with the Amritsar massacre, where British occupation forces fired into a crowd of Indian protesters and just killed a whole bunch of them. And historians look back on that as the turning point where British colonial rule over India began to fade, leading to Indian independence. It may be happening all over again, because Israel cannot sell the idea that this was somehow the fault of the Palestinian protesters and that Israel was just defending itself. This was an out-and-out massacre. And it wasn't gratuitous. It wasn't something that happened spontaneously. The snipers were sent down there deliberately, ahead of time, and put into their fortified positions. Netanyahu just wanted to erase Nakba Day. He wanted to make an example of the Palestinians in Gaza so that there would be no more Nakba Days to cloud the holiday of Israeli independence. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I had a call on the weekend for my show. The question was, they stated, the claim was made that Iran did not sign the nuclear non-proliferation agreement. So I went and did a little Google search today, not Google, but just search. And the only three countries I could see that did not sign it, of course, Israel didn't sign it, Pakistan didn't sign it, neither did India. So am I wrong, or has something not been updated? Because the claim was that Iran did not sign the agreement.
Iran did sign the agreement. They ratified it through their legislature, just like the United States did. And in my images archive, I have this full-page ad that appeared, I think it was in the New York Times, where they had the Shah of Iran in full display there, just bragging about how Iran was moving to nuclear power, and this was a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, because I was told that they didn't sign the agreement, and I didn't find it, so unless I just skimmed over and missed it, so I was correct. Okay.
Yeah, Iran did sign and ratify the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, so did the United States, and Iran has abided by it. The U.S. is in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty on 2 points. First of all, using the threat of military force to coerce Iran into surrendering their rights under the NNPT, and second, under the terms of the NNPT, the United States is obligated to go into Iran and help them build peaceful uses of nuclear technology, power plants, factories for medical isotopes, industrial destatting, whatever that they want. And if the United States had really been concerned that Iran was going to build a secret bomb factory under their power plant, like Israel has underneath the reactor at Dimona, then going on in and helping to pour the foundations and lay the piping and the wiring would have been an excellent way to make sure there wasn't a bomb factory down there. But the U.S. never complied with that part of the NNPT. They just want to scream nuclear weapons to open up the door for an eventual war against Iran.
Opportunity to go in and help them build that system, and definitely keep an eye on the situation. But you're right; it's a good excuse now to cry wolf, use a little fear propaganda, and have no credibility, nothing substantial to back up their claim. I agree with that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks an awful lot there. And in this post-Saddam's nuclear weapons world, most people no longer trust what the corporate media and the U.S. government are saying. And we seem to have reached a point where the government will put out an official lie, and they don't really care if we believe it or not. They'll just go ahead and act on it, like the recent false flag gas attack in Duma up in Syria. And they put out this story, and then they go in and send in the bombs, and they sit back and chuckle, you know, what the heck are you going to do about it? All right, so getting on back here to the news, getting on back to Israel. Another article, this one came out of Electronic Intifada. The Israeli violence has been met with global condemnation, as well as it should. And down there in Gaza, they're holding the funerals for all the people who were killed. And yesterday, of course, 2 more protesters were killed during more of the protest marches along the fence. And Israel is still out there trying to claim that they acted in self-defense, but it's not working. And despite the lock of the Israel lobby in both the United States and Great Britain, we're now starting to see members of the U.S. Congress and members of Parliament stand up and condemn Israel for this horrific massacre in Gaza. And John Yarmouth, a Democratic House member from Kentucky, went on Facebook to say, "I'm deeply saddened by the horrific slaughter of at least 52 Palestinian protesters and injuries to thousands more by Israeli forces." No doubt this will spark claims that Israel has the right to defend itself, and it does, but this has nothing to do with defense. We are witnessing the use of unabated brutality and force against civilians to stifle civil unrest. America must expect and demand more from its close allies. And that's absolutely, absolutely true. Okay, we're going to take a couple more phone calls here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Look how far the wall was away. you know, the wall, like from Escape from New York type of wall, away from the people they're shooting. I mean, come on now. That's Palestinian territory, man. You know, like they're killing people on their own land, protesting on their own land. Like, how hard is that for people to figure out?
Well, Israel's policy is that there is a buffer zone on the far side of the fence. And Israel has told the Palestinians, you may not come within so many feet of that fence. You can't come up to the fence, or it's considered incursion into Israel. That's their justification for it.
No, Mike, they don't believe Palestinians have any land. They think it's all Israelis' land. The Palestinians are just occupying on it. That's the problem. They think they own everything at this point. You know, I mean...
Do you remember that video that came out a few years ago about that drunk Israeli settler who was just walking onto a Palestinian home site and saying, God gave this land to me. This is my land. This is my home. I should put that back up.
Mike, there's a woman that was, she's like a, you know, Zionist, fascist, whatever you want to call it, but she said, like, you know, shoot pregnant women, this or that. She's in the government. They're not animals. These people are crazy. They're beyond being animals. They're just, I don't know what they are, Mike. They're just brainwashed or from birth, and I don't know. It's just like no word to describe what these people become. They become what the Nazis treated the Jews. They are the Nazis, Mike. They become them. Do you realize that? They become them.
Well, this comes down from two sources. It is certainly the leadership of the government of Israel, but it's also literally in their religion. If you read the Talmud, much of this attitude toward non-Jews is actually part of their religion, including describing all non-Jews as cattle, and that they only exist to serve the Jewish people.
Yeah, they think that if you're walking around, like if one of the Jewish people have a heart problem, they can take you off the street as cattle and take your heart out of you and put it in their Jewish brethren, and you'll just be there dead. That's what the Talmud believes. They're crazy. I mean, people think I'm making that up. That's what these people believe. You know,
you're not making it up. You're not making it up. I mean, when I was in my first marriage, and she was Ashkenazi, and she was telling me all this stuff from the Jewish faith, like the Ten Commandments only apply to fellow Jews and everybody else is fair game, that God wants the Jews to have everybody's money. And I honestly thought she was pulling my leg. I thought she was kidding me. And then ultimately I realized, yeah, this is what's really actually part of their religion.
All right, man, I want to switch gears on we all know part of the reason why the U.S. wanted to get Assad out was for the the Saudi-Qatari pipeline, which, remember, everybody, Syria was part of France colonialism. Well, Total, which is France's energy company, I believe, was going to be the one that was involved in the pipeline. Well, hey, Mike, did you know they own 50% in the largest natural gas reserves in Iran? They own 50%. Iran owns 20%, and China owns like 20-something%. But with the sanctions, Mike, if Total, which is a French company, can't be there, guess who's going to get the remaining other 50%? The Chinese, which I don't see a problem with that because, hey, man, it's called business, right? If you put sanctions on somebody, somebody else is going to come in and do business.
Well, Total is already threatening to quit the Iran gas project if they don't get a waiver from the U.S. sanctions. And it's either going to be China or Russia will step in to fill that void.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, is this like orchestrated? I mean, we know this, but these people have to know that.
Dustin,
you know what I mean?
I got to put you on hold. We got 3 minutes of commercials here. Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, if you would just pick up where you left off at the commercial break.
Yeah, I was talking about Total Energy, which, the Chinese will just come in and swoop up what Total, because I don't know if they're willing to risk getting, their financing hurt by the sanctions, or if they're going to get like a free pass, because it seems like the U.S. hands out free passes to certain groups of people, at this point. But but hey, business is business, Mike. The Chinese come in. I don't have a problem with that, because if you put sanctions on somebody else, another company's going to come in. Doesn't matter what country it's from, at this point.
Well,
but,
like I said yesterday, the net result of all these sanctions by the United States against all these other countries is we're literally starting to wall our economy off from the rest of the world. It's leading to economic isolation for this country, and it's causing a lot of harm here, not just France. I mean, Boeing's having to lay off workers now that they can't sell airplanes to Iran. This whole pulling out of the Iran deal has caused all kinds of problems, and everybody's looking at the United States as the troublemaker in this crisis.
Also, Israel's being, Israel, they deserve it. There's a lot of hate now. They caused it, and so did the United States. We're being we're walling ourselves off, Mike. Trump wants to build a wall. The wall's already been built. Economically, it's going on. The world's a big place. It's a global economy. I'm not a globalist, but if you want to do fair trade, there's fair trade. But you're doing dirty tricks. We're doing dirty tricks. We're the big king of dirty tricks with the financing and with Wall Street. Everybody knows that. But Mike, the Belt and the Road is the future, because you realize how many countries are between. You got Kazakhstan, right, and all those other countries that. There's so much business opportunity out there, and you would think the U.S. would Donald Trump's a businessman. You would think he'd be involved in doing business, but it seems like he's just walling ourselves off, along with the neocons and the Democrats and Republicans, whatever, to the rest of the world. We don't make anything. That's the bottom line.
Well,
neither does Israel.
we make stuff. It's just not very good. I remember when I was a kid, when made in Japan meant the cheap, poorly made product. And made in America meant the very best that you could get. Today it's reversed. We had that story the other day where one of the big car makers was saying that the cars that are being produced in their factories in Asia are of higher quality than the cars produced in the factories in Europe.
Mike, I told some of my family members the world has been flipped. We are the new Soviet Union. And Russia, China, those are the free countries. We have more cameras in our country than Russia and China combined. That's why they got that place in Utah that has all those hard drives. They're there to, keep tabs on you and to create what you buy and what they got enough hard drives to know every person in the world, what they're buying and keeping tabs on them. So that's what it's all about. Yeah, I think the world's been flipped, Mike. We're not the good guys. There's no such thing as a country being a good guy. It's good and bad governments. A country's a piece of land. It's the governments that are good and bad.
I wouldn't even say governments are good or bad. There are governments that are effective, and there are governments that are corrupt. And I think that's probably a more accurate way to represent that. And our government is hopelessly corrupt. Worse than that, it's become paranoid. It's afraid of its own people. That's why they spy on us all the time. And it certainly fits the classical definition of being psychotic, in that they're making very reckless, snap decisions, and they have absolutely no empathy toward any other people around them.
Well, psychotic is like decadence, right? Where they would just have champagne while the person is starving to death on the street. That's what I see. It's just sad, Mike. How will we become this? I know American people are partially responsible because we got lazy in the brain, Mike. We become just too busy with other things and not minding the store, if you know what I mean. Not to say our government's not ultimately responsible, but we let this happen. And I don't know if we can fix it at this point. Like you said, we need this thing to collapse. That's the safest route. Is for it to collapse, because otherwise these people will take us to the brink, Mike.
Well, I'll tell you what, next time you go to the supermarket and you're in that checkout line, look at the magazine racks, and you'll see why Americans weren't paying attention to the government, because what passes for news on those newsstands is celebrity gossip, stuff that's recycled from decades ago, like Natalie Wood's murder. And you know, I remember when I was much younger, you'd go to those checkout line newsstands, and you'd find things like Scientific American and National Geographic, and you'd find serious publications there. Today, it's all tabloid and all garbage. They're all agog over the coming royal wedding, and that's why people think that's what they're supposed to be thinking about. Anyway, Dustin, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We got a bunch of calls waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, thank you for being so patient and waiting. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. By the way, I sent you an article from The Onion about an Israeli soldier. I hope you take a look at it, maybe even post it. It's pretty funny. But at any rate, Dustin's description of Gaza being like the wall being like an Escape from New York thing is extremely apt. And beyond all that, you remember that they've been persecuting these guys who are 90 and 100 years old now for the Holocaust, who worked at the veterinarian center at Auschwitz, or was the accounts payable guy at Auschwitz. Even Eichmann himself was just a train logistician. He never shot or gassed anybody. He just did train schedules. But I wish they would release the names of these hundreds, maybe many hundreds, of snipers who've been picking off these, and executing these people from a safe distance for a month now. And it's not just 58 or 60. That was just on Monday. Let's go back just over the last month. They shot down about 8,000 people, and about, I don't know, it's got to be above 100 are dead now.
Yes.
So it's not just Bloody Monday. That was just this week. But what gets me, Mike, is the headline after headline and image after image. The Israeli sniper dancing as he cripples or shoots somebody. You know, dancing like the Ralph Fiennes character in Schindler's List after he shot an inmate supposedly, or the kill, shoot them, burn them, kill them, kill them, kill them. The people sitting up with their on their lawn chairs and with their barbecues, watching these slaughters going on. This is a societal thing. This is a sick racial superior, Jewish supremacist, Aryan chosen people. We can do whatever we want and screw everybody else. And you know what's worse? We can't even talk about it. They can't teach this in schools now in 26 states, or even talk about it on a college campus.
Yes.
Because they'll get fired. So
you're absolutely right.
That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is amazing for a people that claim to have suffered so much persecution for the last 2,000 years, for them to all of a sudden turn around and, just be such abusers and persecutors themselves. And maybe part of the mentality is, well, it was done to us, now it's our turn. But you have to remember what Gandhi said. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and pretty soon everybody's blind and toothless.
I submit to you that what we are watching in Gaza and the West Bank, and we're even watching it here, although obviously incrementally slower, because we already are having our speech curtailed. We're already having unfair amounts of money taken from us and given to them. But it would be what we're seeing in Gaza and the West Bank is exactly what would happen if they had enough power to do it to us. That's just what they believe. We're there to be shorn and sheeped and served. Serve them, the goyim, the cattle, to serve them. Even their chief rabbi says that. This is the chief rabbi.
Yeah. They do make these outrageous statements from time to time that only reinforces, the stereotypes held by much of the world. And if you look back over that 2,000-year history of persecutions and expulsions of the Jewish people, it always comes down to the same cause. They refuse to integrate and blend in with the communities that have taken them in, and instead treat them as a target. They predate upon them and until the hostility builds to the breaking point.
And they never look at that. They're always the victim. Hell, they're even the victim here in their own minds. But it's unbelievable, and I hope people are seeing this for what it is and enjoy talking about it now, because it's illegal to talk about it in some states, criminally illegal in South Carolina, and you can't get a government contract if you're a corporation or an individual that participates in the BDS, even in California or New York or Ohio or South Carolina or 26 other states. I mean, they are after our rights. They want to be able to shoot people down en masse whenever they want and blame the Palestinians who they shot down and not have everybody talk about it.
You're absolutely right. The government of Israel absolutely hates the Bill of Rights here in the United States. They want it to go away, especially that First Amendment, because they don't like the fact that people are talking about what the government of Israel has been doing. They don't want the criticism. This law that they passed in South Carolina, equating criticism of the government of Israel with anti-Semitism, first of all, it's stupid. It's like saying that the only reason people ever complained about the Nazis is they hate the German people. But somebody needs to take that right up to the U.S. Supreme Court and get it challenged on First Amendment grounds.
Four of 9 or something are Jewish, and they probably won't hear it. But nevertheless, Mike, they want to they create all these by dominating our foreign policy, create millions and millions of refugees throughout Europe and the United States. But they and they won't take anybody in themselves, but they want us to take them in.
Now they're trying to kick out the Ethiopians.
The Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment, they'll come down, oh my God, school shootings, how horrible. But you don't hear Bloomberg or any of these guys talking about the 8,000 Palestinians who were gunned down, unarmed, but yet they want to take our guns away. But yet the settlers they use the Palestinians as live target practice. That's an everyday thing. I mean, they want free speech for themselves, but not for anybody else. So that's my rant for the day. But it just drives. And notice I haven't called in for a couple of days because I was just so angry at all this. It just drove me nuts. So.
Well, I understand your anger. I'm angry as well, and you're absolutely right. Israel wants a two-tiered social system where they have all the rights and all the privileges and all the wealth, and everybody else is basically just held down and kept basically in prison. I mean, that's what Gaza is, the world's largest open-air prison. I think that's one of the reasons why these Israeli security companies are teaching the American police to treat Americans the way the IDF treats the Palestinians. And that does not bode well for the future.
I would much rather live in the Warsaw Ghetto than Gaza, by far. But at any rate, that's it for me, Mike. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Raleigh in Minnesota. Was that Minnesota? Or yeah, it's Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show, Raleigh. What is on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This is the second time I've listened to your show. I'm a contributor to Renegade, and one of the hosts recommended your particular show to listen to. But I'm calling in about the coin that's being minted in Israel right now. It's a coin that's being coined, no pun intended, the temple coin, that has Donald Trump's face on it, and it's a coin being minted in celebration of 70 years of fulfillment, and it has a face of Donald Trump actually on the coin, as if he's a prophet or something.
Yes.
Alongside with King Cyrus. And King Cyrus brought the Jews back into Israel 2,500 years ago. And it's also a commemoration coin dedicated to the fact that even Donald Trump might even destroy the Dome of the Rock that's often mistaken for Al-Aqsa that resides right now on the Temple Mount, you know, as part of their long-term strategies, you know. And there's going to be more flags declared for victory in different territories inside of the Middle East. And, you know, they got the coin ready for you to put in your back pocket for that. And also on it, you know, it says 70 years of fulfillment, meaning talking about the 70 years of independence, more like the Blitzkrieg. It's more like the Nakba, the great atrocity that happened to the Palestinians when they were driven from their land.
Well, I think the reason they put Trump's face on the coin goes back to an observation that I've made, that Trump is proving himself to be a very weak and easily manipulated leader, and we keep hearing that he's very susceptible to flattery, and obviously having your face on a coin is a very flattering thing. And I think that's why they did it, because Israel's government is expecting more from the White House to support their agenda. And you're absolutely right. Israel wants to basically scrape all of the Islamic temples off of the Temple Mount to build the third temple there. Although technically they've already had 3 temples. When the Messiah didn't show up, they called the third temple just a remodeling of the second one. And the real joke is that Israeli archaeologists have said that the first temple wasn't actually built at that location. It was actually built on the next mountain over to the southeast. But you know, people get caught up in these beliefs and they become a focal point. There is this wonderful movie called Kingdom of Heaven. And in it, toward the end of the movie, when Balian is about to surrender Jerusalem to Salahuddin, Balian is saying, if you try and take the city by force, I'll tear it all down. Every rock, every stone, everything that drives men mad, I will destroy it. And Salahuddin says, I wonder if it would not be better if you did. And that really gets to the heart of the issue. That one little tiny piece of land has spawned so much misery and war and suffering throughout history. And, you know, were an asteroid to hit it, I would not be one who would mourn its passing.
I wrote an article for the Renegade Tribune. It's titled, U.S. Embassy in Israel Opens Today. Israel Mayor calls for the beginning of a new world order. It was written in May the 14th, but I also talk about CNN even declaring that the end of the United States acting as an honest broker between the Israelis and the Palestinian negotiations, that's ended. You know, they're no longer going to negotiate anything, you know. The facade is gone. You know, there's no longer going to be a pretense to that. And I don't know if that's better or worse, you know. They're knocking down walls and barriers, and, you know, if they don't even have to pretend that we live in a democracy or even thriving to have one inside of places like Palestine where people turn a blind eye to people getting killed just for protesting, occupation for 70 years for Jesus Christ, you know. I mean, and at the same time, you know, you've already talked about what's going on in South Carolina, where you can't criticize that, and South Carolina, you know, soon, you know, or you might even go to prison, and that's the state that has the Confederate flag. I mean, will the South please rise again and stand up for your rights, you know? And it also happens to be the state of Nikki Haley, and Nikki Haley was put in there, and she's in the back pocket of Casino Man, Adelson, you know, over in Las Vegas. He spawned her, he made her, you know, and put her in position to do exactly what she's doing right now. She's no longer the governor of South Carolina. She's the ambassador, but she still has those influences in there. And I just see this as, you know, the Middle East as being like the Dutch boy with his finger in the well. If you let go of that little finger, it will flood the whole town, and that's the only thing standing between Israel from putting down their flag and declaring victory and having a greater state of Israel and being the sole untouched superpower in the world and having all the resources of the Middle East as part of their domination plan of controlling everything and having all resources and owning every blade of grass and every drop of water in the world.
Yeah, it is a terrible situation right now, especially. Excuse me, I had to take a sneeze there. I'm a little under the weather today, so please bear with me for these brief moments of silence. Yeah, it is an ugly situation. We do have a government of a nation that has couldn't get to the switch that time. They've gone rogue. They have absolutely no respect for international law. They thumb their nose at the United Nations, and they have achieved enough power in so many nations on Earth that nobody can hold them to account for what they're doing. But public opinion is something they're obviously very concerned about, or they wouldn't be attacking the BDS movement and trying to get all these laws passed saying that it's a crime to criticize Israel. And nobody, no government should be above criticism. That's the real reason for that First Amendment to be in the Bill of Rights, is that we have a right to criticize government, any government, when they act wrongly. And I don't care what the makeup of the Supreme Court is. I can't imagine that the Supreme Court would allow this law to stand. In any event, you have to go back to Marbury versus Madison, an earlier Supreme Court decision that basically said laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. So, I mean, if South Carolina can get on out there and say it's a crime to criticize Israel, but it's an invalid law, and we are under no obligation to obey invalid and unconstitutional laws.
That's exactly right, and we're at a point where boycotting, like refusing to buy a Johnson & Johnson product, or like refusing to buy Pampers for your children because what's going on in Israel could label you a terrorist. You know, it goes back to the first time I heard Anti-Defamation League. I actually thought that was a diaper brand as well. But they are full of crap for this one. You know, yeah. Banning the idea of being able to criticize Israel, and it does not make you an anti-Semite. You know,
no, it doesn't. Really that's part of the Israel propaganda. Raleigh, I got to let you go. We got to take another commercial break. We got a bunch of callers waiting very patiently. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones to James in Tokyo. James, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Oh, it was too patiently, Michael, but I'll get over it after a couple months of therapy.
Okay.
Anyway, first question is, how is a lovely harp-playing angel? Is she okay?
She's doing a lot better. She finally got into see a Straub doctor after 3 months on a waiting list, and they've identified what the problem actually is, and she's seeing a sports medicine doctor this afternoon right after the radio show.
Well, give her my best, and I hope everything heals quick, and that was my first thing. Anyway, nothing to do with current events, but I want to get into current events right now. I've heard Dustin from Jersey and Peter, and they're both great guys, and they're talking about Gaza and the West Bank, and I think there's a lot bigger picture. It's like the inundation of Muslims into Europe, where Obama took out Libya and with Hillary, and they let all these Muslims go into Europe and like totally devastating it. And it's like you get like rape capitals and no-go zones and this and that. And I think like everybody, including you, like you're talking about Israel and the West Bank and Gaza, and you're forgetting like the big picture. And why can't people forget the big picture? And additionally, I want to ask you a different question. What do you think about QAnon? Because I never hear you talk about QAnon, where he's coming out with all the stuff, you know, like what's going down, and a lot of stuff happens to be true. What do you think about that?
Well, some is, some turns out not to be true, and a lot of it is so vague. To be very honest, I think it's an attempt to distract people away from other websites that basically come out with observations about what's going on, backed up by citations and available facts. And the problem I have with QAnon is that whoever's behind this is coming out with all kinds of claims, but nothing with which to support them. And so I did try and read some of those posts for a while. I just didn't get a feeling that this was a source I cared to trust.
I think a lot of stuff that he came out with, like, has been factual. And especially, like, you know, showing pictures of, like, you know, like with Trump and this and that. But I don't know. It's very interesting to see, because if it is true, and maybe it's not, and maybe you're right, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a big following, and I think it'll just, like, devastate everything, every kind of media, every kind of, like, your media, regular media. You know, it's just going to be an amazing kind of thing, and I'm hoping that is true. But, you know, if it's not, maybe you're right. Beats me.
All right. Well, listen, James, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to do a station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 and more phone calls after these few words. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we take more phone calls, I have an update on this story about the 8-month-old child who was killed by an Israeli sniper at the border between Gaza and Israel. And when the story first came on out, we had a caller who called on in and said, how could this mother be that stupid? Which I obviously agreed. Apparently, she didn't intend to go to the border protests. There was a mix-up. She got on the wrong bus and didn't realize that she was going to the border protest until she was actually there. Apparently, she got on out, was looking for a way to get away from there, and that's when the shooting actually happened. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, as you know, there's a little bit of a digital processing delay in your all's program feed, and I had originally called with what you were talking about at the I heard it after the board op said, "Oh, he's talking about that right now," and but so I can add a little something to that. What you were mentioning about the archaeology,
yeah,
I had heard a story about one of these ark hunters, you know, that had decided to hunt for some other tombs or something in Jerusalem, and he had found caves underneath of Golgotha and started looking at that, and it looked like to him there was a place on top of Golgotha where they, you know, had these holes to put the crucifixes down in, and he found a crack and followed it down to some caves and claims that the ark is hidden underneath of there, and that's where one of the temples actually was, and the archaeology is all wrong. But, you know, it's a little bit far-fetched. But one thing that the actual official archaeology folks found was a bath, a Roman bath that dates to like 150 A.D., underneath of the Wailing Wall with coins that date, put it contemporarily dated. I guess they dropped coins in the bath or something. And so the entire Wailing Wall that a lot of people are saying, you know, prophecy stuff, prophecy pundits, John Hagen, all these pro-Zionists are saying not one stone shall be left upon another, and therefore that wall is part of the temple. It turns out it wasn't part of the temple.
No, it wasn't. It was the foundations of a Roman fort.
Yeah, so that's kind of ironic. We got all these Jews bowing and then bobbing to a temple to a sun god or something. I mean, that just seems that just seems wrong on so many ways. You know, that like they're engaging in unwitting idolatry or something. But don't you have a section on what really happened.com about the family of Jesus and how they were persecuted and chased by both Roman Catholics and are being probably people that are being killed now besides actual Christians?
I have an article called "Killing the Family of Jesus," which is where geneticists have basically said that the closest living descents to the biblical Hebrews are the present-day Palestinians. And after 2,000 years, probably most of them carry the blood of Jesus/Joshua, in their DNA. Skipping on back here to the coins in the Roman baths, the Romans believed that copper was a cure for arthritis. And so Romans who were dealing with arthritis would throw some copper coins into the bath and wear copper jewelry as well.
Well, there's a lot of modern folks that tout that, but, you can do a lot more with just getting some of this modern, sad American diet out of your habits, with I think we're eating something crazy like over 100 and some pounds of sugar a year, whereas you go back 100 years ago and people only ate about 4 pounds of molasses and honey and sugar. So that's causing a lot of trouble. But there's apparently these societies of Christians, because Jews can't set foot upon Temple Mount. Ritually, they're considered defiled because they can't do their animal sacrifices. So there's these Christians that go up on Temple Mount every year and lay a ceremonial cornerstone for a new temple. Now, I would just ask, I know you're not necessarily Christian, but I would say, doesn't that fit right in with the double-minded man is unstable in all his ways? Here you are wanting to support a new temple that would make Jesus' sacrifice pretty much null and void by restarting animal sacrifices and turning back to the shadow. I think a lot of Christians have short-circuited their head, and they're double-minded by just blindly supporting Israel. And then South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, had a large contingency of Jewish folks that fought for the South. They were so pro-slavery, they fought for the South. So, that's historically across Jewish history. They were involved in the slave trade to the point of where now, I think this goes back to Trump's executive order on December the 21st against human trafficking, when they went in there and just beat Libya to pieces with their mercenaries, and that'd be Hillary and crew. Now it's a big slave market.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, it is. And you're absolutely right that they had a big role in the American slave trade, which is glossed over in the history of that era.
It's going on to this day. I mean, it's going on to this day, and companies like Dynacorp, and I don't know, you probably remember the Airlift of Evil and that kind of stuff, but some of these American companies their international divisions are involved in this.
Yes.
And it's legal in some of these countries, like in the Isles of Greek, the Greek Isles or whatever, and in Jerusalem. You can be a pimp as long as you only have one girl. Some of these American companies in their international divisions are actually providing girls in Israel. And it's rare that somebody talks about that. I don't know if you've seen Jill and Joanne, and Jim Moriarty.
Yeah.
It would be a good interview, I think, if you haven't already. I missed it if you did. I think they'd be a great interview. Well, they escaped Al-Qaeda by several close calls. They almost got killed in Libya, and they have direct evidence of it was not a popular uprising against Gaddafi.
No, of course it wasn't.
But that's part of this program. I think I saw a clip on your website about I can't remember the general's name who saw that in the Pentagon. Basically, some famous quote: "Anything looks like a nail." We're talking about replacing all these countries at the behest of Jerusalem, and so Syria is next in the list. I guess we got Iraq. They got rid of Gaddafi. Who else is next? They got regime change in Egypt, Syria. I can't remember the list.
I'd have to go back and find that video from General Wesley Clark, who came out with the original list. And of course, now Venezuela has been added to it. I imagine it's a fluid document, and a lot of it's driven by economics. Iraq got moved to the top of the list because they were selling their oil for the euro. Libya got shoved to the top of the list because they wanted to sell their oil for the gold dinar. And it's all about protecting the petrodollar.
They are in a precarious spot here, because I think if some of the stuff that the pilots for 9/11 Truth has got through Freedom of Information Act, if Iran in defending itself or Saudi Arabia in defending itself is allowed to bring this into the discovery process, it's going to be before the courts as evidence that if all they have to do is prove one of those planes had a GPS on 9/11, and they've already done that to my reckoning looking at their data. That planes manufactured in 1991 for commercial use were not allowed to have GPS, and yet one of them is showing GPS in a data field, and the data field was not able to be collated by American Airlines spreadsheets. They had to use a generic one from Boeing, and it shows a GPS is operational. This kind of stuff comes out in these trials for Iran defending itself. 6 million people may very well disappear in Israel.
Well, I don't want to see that happen.
It looks like they pulled it off.
I don't want to see that happen because then the Zionists would have another 100 years of we're the victims, we're the victims, we're the victims, and we don't need to hand that to them on a silver platter. Okay?
No, but somebody might. Somebody might. If it looks like the Unit 7, what is it, Unit 8200 or whatever, their elite hacking crew, technological Army division or whatever, if they were involved in this, of the Qayyum and that crew, if it comes out and with Iran and Saudi Arabia trying to defend themselves, if that comes out in court, I would not be surprised that it gets settled. These 800 families, reach some settlement without it going through discovery process and evidence that would point toward Israel.
Well, here's the real issue, and it's one of the reasons why Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. There is something like $160 billion worth of Iranian assets frozen inside the United States. And because of the P5+1 deal, the U.S. was supposed to give that money back. They never did. And it looks like maybe they don't have it to give. And so now they're trying to carve off chunks of it with these rather ridiculous lawsuits.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, all this time since September 11th, who has ever in the mainstream media claimed that Iran was part of the 9/11 pageant? Until the last few weeks, I'd never heard any connections to Iran.
No, first they blamed Afghanistan and launched a war into there. Then they blamed Iraq and launched a war into that. And these days, anytime they're getting ready to invade another country, we can count on the corporate media to say they may have been involved in 9/11. So.
It'd be comical if it wasn't so sad.
Yeah, it's a very, very serious situation.
I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. One more phone call here. Kevin in Pensacola, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Great to speak with you, and I hope that y'all are feeling all right with all this sulfur in the air over there. I wanted to sort of connect a few dots. Forgive me for being kind of fragmented. Netflix put on this new documentary about the 2003 bank robber who attached a bomb to a gentleman, had him rob a bank as part of a scavenger hunt. And it's really diabolical. It's really twisted, but I kind of view that like an analogy of certain false flags, and then you've got certain controlled opposition and alternative media who then lead us into the wrong direction. That brings me into Vegas. There are quite a few sites that are, obviously pointing towards conspiracy on behalf of the Mossad and Saudi Arabia in the Vegas shooting. What's your take on that?
I would say that it's an attempt to lay a false trail away because so many people think that the Vegas shooting was a gun grabber false flag. And I think one of the reasons why the independent media is under attack right now is because every time the corporate media and the government come out with a lie, we take it apart. We find all the problems with it. We find the inconsistencies. We find the contradictory information. And following the assassination of John F. Kennedy, it took something like 30 years before half of America understood the Warren Report was a cover-up. These days, in the age of the internet, the lifespan of a government lie can be clocked with an egg timer.
Do you think Mossad had their hands in it?
I don't think so. I think this was basically another staged mass shooting to push for a ban on sporting rifles.
Okay, I definitely see that as well. On a separate note, Pensacola is next to Eglin, next to Colbert.
Yes.
Very big Air Force bases. And, we're used to bombs being dropped, but I tell you what, they have been going crazy lately, getting very prepared. And I really hope I don't put them in any harm's way or anything, but my father works with Lockheed, and he's in Tel Aviv at the moment. And they're setting up training for the F-35 over there. Mm-hmm. And, it's amazing. They know it's not really the best aircraft. It's kind of like during the Civil War and many other wars, how they, it's like they try to even the playing field a little bit. We can't make one side too much better than the other so that the war is not over too soon.
Yeah, that's what the military-industrial complex wants. They want permanent, perpetual war because that's permanent, perpetual money. When peace is declared, the defense contractors all cry.
Absolutely, because war is the health of the state, right?
War is the health of the war business. It's not the health of the state. Look around you. We're living in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but go on out, walk around your town, try and see it as a tourist would for the first time. Look at the cracks in the pavement, the corroded metal, the retail vacancies, the hungry and the homeless. These wars are not good for the ordinary American people. They're only good for the military-industrial complex. And Eisenhower did warn us about this.
He did, and I got into a heated debate yesterday on social media, and it was my farewell address. I told them, the dumbest thing anybody could do right now is to join the military. And, of course, I had some veterans agree with me, but for the most part, everybody just sticks to it. Well, how dare you say that? I had somebody who knew somebody who did something and died one time, and yada, 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 and you just cannot get past the programming unless you do it one person at a time, right?
Well, don't forget.
You do a fantastic job of articulating it.
Don't forget, a lot of those people who are on social media are paid to be there to push the propaganda, and they're out there to just push the war agenda, push the American agenda, push the Israel agenda, and they're actually paid to do it. This is a service that most public relations companies will actually offer. You can go to their websites and they'll say, for a fee, we will load up social media with some of our operatives who will basically push your agenda while pretending to be ordinary people. And it's called grassroots lobbying. It is legal, and unfortunately, unlike lobbyists approaching members of the government, these lobbyists talking to ordinary people are not required to identify themselves as lobbyists.
Hey, that gives me an idea. Maybe we should start hiring them as well. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's an AstroTurf movement. Yeah, the sad thing is these are people that I've grown up with in a military town, of course. So most of them have family that have been in the military. But just the level of well, if you've got nothing to hide, you've done nothing wrong. Just people constantly reciting known Nazi propaganda. Like, you have no idea what you're saying, why you're defending it, but it's just emotional impulse. That's all it is, just emotional impulse.
Well, it's part emotions, and it's also partly people wanting to reassure themselves that they're informed enough where they can express an opinion, but they haven't gone through the work of actually informing themselves about what's really going on. They hear it on TV, they see it on a headline, and they say, I'm up to date, I know what's going on, and they'll thrust themselves into a conversation. And it's intellectually lazy. and it's self-deceptive as well. But yeah, that's another part of the problem of trying to get out there in social media and have a meaningful discussion.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the best thing to do is for everybody to just form email lists and just try to expand your email list. One thing before I go, is that you singing on that song that's the preamble?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't sing on this show.
Like okay.
I sing in Claire's choir, but I don't sing on this show.
All right. Well, cool. I do like your buffer music as well, and I do appreciate y'all. I donated $20 yesterday, and I'm going to keep it up. So thank you so much for what you do, sir.
Well, thank you for the donation, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right, the phone lines are now empty, and getting on back to Israel. Apparently, there's an organization calling itself Labor Friends of Israel, and it's basically over there. Coming on out, like so many others, trying to put a positive face on what happened between Israel and Gaza on Bloody Monday. More about this when we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, if you want to keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, we need your help. We can't do it alone. I mean, for the first 12 years that I was doing my website, I was able to pay for it out of my own pocket. It's just not practical, and we need help. So if you can send in even just a little bit, it's going to help. And the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call if you want to become a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 03. The network thanks you. And I do have another announcement. I got a lot of emails about this. Yes, we know that the iPhone app is not downloading our podcast. The podcast system apparently was broken on Monday morning without any warning. May have been hacked. We don't really know yet. They're working to restore all the functions, and RBN is asking for you to be patient. They'll get the podcast back up, and hopefully we're not being censored here. And RBN does welcome a detailed notice of the exact apps you are using, as the information may be useful for troubleshooting and reestablishing all of the previous functionality. So we're aware of the problem. I got a lot of emails about this. Okay, let's get back to this story. The Labor Friends of Israel basically came on out trying to blame the victim out there on Twitter, and they made a bunch of incredible claims trying to claim that Israelis were injured and border communities were attacked by the Palestinians. Neither are true. Not one Israeli was injured, let alone killed, during this massacre. And there were no border communities attacked. They're just out there trying to, as Bush would say, catapult the propaganda to sell the idea that somehow Israel is the victim in all of this. They made us do it, mommy. Now, the Palestinians have recalled their ambassadors from 4 EU states over the U.S. Embassy celebration. And these are 4 European Union states whose ambassadors attended the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, and the Palestinians are very upset about that, understandably. Jerusalem is supposed to be a shared international city. That goes all the way back to the United Nations partition plan that said, yes, we're going to carve off part of Palestine and create a new nation of Israel. But Israel has always coveted Jerusalem. If you look at the maps of the original partition plan, Jerusalem was well inside Palestinian territory. And bit by bit, over the years, Israel has carved out this corridor, and now they're trying to encircle and envelop the city. They do feel that they're above international law. Now, Saudi Arabia is getting ready to confront Trump's illegal decision to move the Israel embassy to Jerusalem, and it was illegal to do so. And they're calling a meeting of the Arab League to discuss what they're all going to do about this. So this embassy move has basically ratcheted up tensions all across the Middle East. And apparently one of the sources, quoted by Egypt's state news agency, is saying the meeting will confront the Israeli aggression on the Palestinian people. And that's exactly what it was. It was an aggression. It was a massacre. Let's call it what it was. The Bloody Monday Massacre. Turkey is urging Islamic countries to review their ties with Israel after what happened down there in the Gaza border. Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim told his ruling party in parliament Ankara would call an extraordinary summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So this has just shaken up the entire Middle East, and that's not going to be good for anybody. As I said, what this Bloody Monday Massacre is Israel's version of the Amritsar Massacre, and it could mark the turning point where Israel's lock on the region starts to slip. Israel was starting to form relationships with other Arab countries, friendly relationships, especially with Saudi Arabia. That may all now be lost. Belgium has summoned their Israeli envoy after she called everybody killed in the Gaza bloodshed terrorists. It was okay to shoot them all, even that 8-month-old baby, because they're all terrorists. They weren't terrorists, they were protesters. This started out peacefully enough, just signs and flags and banners walking along their side of the fence, away from the fence, in accord with Israeli dictates, and the snipers just started shooting people. Every Friday when the marches happened again, Israel shot more people. It was a massacre. It was an atrocity. There's no other way to describe it. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And there is this doctor, Dr. Tarek Lubani. He normally lives in Ontario, up in Canada. And he was down in the Gaza Strip treating Palestinians who were wounded. And he was clearly marked as a doctor, and the Israelis shot him anyway. But it was a minor wound, and because medical supplies are in such short supply down there, he didn't bother taping it up or treating it at all. Basically just let it scab on over. And again, it just shows what a terrible situation this is, where Israel is intentionally targeting not just journalists, but medical personnel. Now, I imagine down in South Carolina, those legislators who just passed that law equating criticism of Israel's government with anti-Semitism are probably squirming in their seats right about now, or at least I would hope they would have enough of a moral conscience to be squirming in their seats right now, because they had just passed that law. And then we have this Bloody Monday Massacre. And I imagine there's probably, or there should be, a lot of people in South Carolina calling up their legislators and saying, look, you can't say that criticizing Israel for what they just did in Gaza is anti-Semitism. We're criticizing the actions of a government. Anti-Semitism is hating Semites just because they're Semites. This is a just criticism. We're talking about the behavior of the government of Israel. We're talking about actions. This has nothing to do with their religion, has nothing to do with their ethnicity. It is the brutality that we are criticizing. And you cannot criminalize that. That goes against that First Amendment. Okay, we're going to take another phone call from John in Phoenix. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm an employed psychologist. There's a psychiatrist, there's this chiropractor by the name of Mark Miller, MMLLAR. He's in town here in Mesa. And he gives out this medicine called lithium orotate, and it's a low-dose form of lithium. It's got a delivery system in it, and it works on deficiencies. And he's running a little operation where he's got kids diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, depression, and he's giving them 3 to 6 tablets a day, and all these kids are thriving. while the clinic I go to in the state, you know, there's people that are committing suicide 12 times the rate of the national average. And they're giving, you know, all these different pills, all these different counseling and everything else. And it's just like, no wonder the nation is $20 trillion in debt.
Well, that's one of the reasons the nation is in debt. But the medical...
Well, okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know, medicine has become just another money-making racket, and that goes all the way back to Richard Nixon, who signed the Health Maintenance Organization Act, which basically turned medical care into basically a health factory, a McDonald's of medicine, if you will. And doctors these days coming out of medical school, they're literally taught, prescribe, 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 sell treatment, sell treatment, sell treatment. One doctor I know basically said that when hospitals rate doctors in deciding whether to keep them on or not, it's how much revenue they generate that they look at first, not what their cure rate is, not whether they've had complaints from patients. It's all about, again, the money.
Yeah, I've been waiting for counseling, and the last few times I've been in my clinic, they've called me in. They've had somebody sit me down, and they got a piece of paper in their hands with my address and my phone number, verifying all that, asking me all these questions like, you know, do you have mental illness in your family? And it's the same thing, and they're just sitting there filing this paperwork, not even doing anything while I'm sitting here waiting for counseling.
Yeah, it's a horrible system. I mean, Claire had to wait 3 whole months to get an appointment with a doctor at the Straub, and finally got to see the doctor. Apparently, Claire likes the doctor, and finally got somebody to really look at what was going on with Claire's back, because we had gone to no less than 3 chiropractors, all of whom missed that her L5 was seriously out of place. In fact, I was the one who spotted it, because I was in the room for the 3rd chiropractor, and I said, that can't be right. And the chiropractor said, oh, yeah, that should go back on in. So that was one of the 2 problems, and the doctor has now identified the 2nd problem. And like I said earlier in the show, I'm taking Claire to see the sports medicine doctor right after the radio show today to look at that 2nd problem. But she is doing a lot better. She's just going to have to learn how to be more careful, because she is getting OLD, and
don't say that around her.
yeah, well, you know, she doesn't like me to say that around her, and she's, you know, she's getting fragile, as old people tend to, and so
yeah.
just, you know, she's going to have to adjust her lifestyle, and that's just a reality.
Well, you and Claire like my second parents. So
well, 90s. One of them lived over 100.
All right, well, take care, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Shifting on over to Iran, there's a very interesting article that came out from Russia Today, basically saying that Trump misjudged Iran. And apparently what this analysis is saying is that Trump was counting on Iran to simply withdraw from the nuclear deal once the U.S. pulled out, which would open the door for an Iranian invasion. But instead, Iran has gone the other way. They're trying to keep the deal together. They're going to all these other countries in the P4+1 and saying, let's keep the deal going. We're going to engage in trade, and we'll just let the U.S. go its own little way, which is why John Bolton is now out there trying to arm twist all the other members of the P4+1 to pull out of the agreement. This is all about opening the way for an invasion of Iran, because gosh darn it, Iran is selling their oil for currencies other than dollars. They refuse to allow a private central bank in there, and they're a regional political threat to almighty Israel. So we've got to have a war. We just need a good excuse to do that. But I agree with the analysis in this article. I do think that Trump did misjudge what Iran's reaction was going to be. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yesterday in Chicago, there were several hundred people demonstrating against the massacre in Israel at the Israeli consulate. And let me tell you, every news outlet did cover it, which I was very happy to hear. One of the complaints that the demonstrators did mention, they wanted to know, where are there liberal Democratic leaders. They said they are very silent regarding what happened, and they were including the senators, representatives, and other politicians. They were saying, how come you guys aren't out there speaking against what happened on Monday? So, again, I'm very happy that the news media was out there.
Well, that is a valid point here because, you know, the liberals are always out there complaining about everything, racism, abortion, you know, bathrooms that say male and female only. But when it comes to Israel, yeah, they just clam right on up.
Well, do you think you're being either blackmailed or else they're told you're not going to get reelected if you don't, if you say something?
Oh, well, that's definitely true of our elected officials. I mean, anybody who speaks out against Israel gets the old heave-ho. Just ask Cynthia McKinney sometime.
Right, right. And finally, it appears that the lady who's in charge of the CIA will be confirmed either this week or next week. Now, isn't it kind of ironic, you know, what's going on in Israel? Now we put a lady in there who believes in torture?
Yeah, I mean, I find that very, very alarming, and I find it very alarming that she refused to say torture is immoral. It's a bad sign, the direction this country is going. You know, we're turning into the Fourth Reich here. You know, use of torture, concentration camps, starting wars based on lies and deceptions, you know, and just spreading across the globe.
Right. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Thank you for the phone call. Getting on back to the news here. Apparently, Vladimir Putin, proving once again that he is a global statesman, is trying to basically act as a mediator between Israel and Iran in order to avoid a war. Now, that's going to be very tricky. Iran doesn't want a war, obviously. They haven't invaded any other nation in a war of conquest in over 200 years. But on the other hand, Israel does want war in Iran as long as somebody else is going to fight and pay for it. So Putin's trying to go on in there and settle things down again the way he did in Syria. So good on him. See, we already mentioned this just before. The U.S. is holding on to between $100 and $120 billion in Iranian assets, which have been accruing interest, by the way. And after the P5+1 deal, they were supposed to give that money back, unfreeze it, and they never did. They had to return that money to Iran sooner or later unless the U.S. pulled out of the deal, which they just did. So there was a financial motive as well. We just want to hang on to the money. You know, we never give money back. Once we grab it, we never give it back. All right, another phone call here. Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
I heard about Lady Claire. It sounds like she has degenerative disc disease, possibly, you know, some herniated discs.
Nope. It's
no?
not that. No.
Well, that's good because I suffer from that. It's horrible. Anyway, I sent you a link about the CBC. They actually did, you know, kind of a, you know, decent story about what happened on Monday. I was watching, like, I like reading the comments, to see what people are thinking. And, you know, it's amazing, Mike. Comments were disappearing right off the page. They have, you know, like the voting up and voting down, right?
Yes.
It was changing right before my eyes. It was just disgusting. A disgusting display of censorship. And, you know, it's a joke. If people think they have a voice by you know, going into these comment sections on certain websites anyways, they're deluding themselves because it's horrible what they do.
Yeah, I gave up commenting on major media websites because my posts would always be deleted.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen your posts on certain websites, and then, you know, I've gone back to them and I've seen that they've been gone. They're just gone.
Yep.
It's this is a joke. I mean, you know, I could just imagine what George Carlin would say about what's going on today, right now. And, you know, I mean, honestly, like I'm a conservative. I'm very right leaning, but I'm not, you know, up the wazoo, one of these tightwad kind of evangelical, if I pronounce that word right, I don't even know, you know, type of people. I mean, I believe that people should take care of themselves. Period. They shouldn't rely on anyone else. You know, and that's just my underlying philosophy. But to see, you know, what's been going on with this liberalization, it's disgusting.
Well,
why should you pay for somebody else?
The liberal model is to get everybody to be dependent on the government, because dependency means control. Dependency means slavery. And during the Obama administration, they were literally running ads for people to sign up for food stamps. Because if everybody is dependent on the government just to eat, then people aren't going to stand up and complain when the government does something really icky.
It's a joke. I mean, you know, inside of every person that is left-leaning is honestly a communist. I work with a couple of people that came from Czechoslovakia back when they were a communist state.
Yes.
And, you know, they think that that's great. And I can't understand it. It just, you know, that flabbergasts me to have to rely on someone else for anything at all. You know, sometimes, you know, you need a little bit of help here and there.
If that's what they were raised with, that's what they're going to think the world ought to be. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about, you know, grabbing kids when they're very young, too young to know that the big people are full of it, and you indoctrinate them with certain beliefs around which their personality will evolve. And once that has happened, they've grown to adulthood, getting rid of those beliefs takes a supreme act of will. And it can be a very disorienting experience when it happens as well. So that they'll grab the kids, put them in kindergarten, start talking about what a wonderful government and banking system we have. They'll put them in Sunday school and you know, teach them about the imaginary playmate up in the sky. And just if that's what they're raised to believe, they'll go on believing it for the rest of their lives. And certainly that kind of indoctrination was also being used in the communist countries.
Yeah, and there's that religion thing again too. You know, those chains that people build in their own heads, of the way the world works around them. It's just amazing. Thanks a lot for your time, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch to Don in Iowa. Don, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I see you here on YouTube that you did a segment with Richie Allen, right?
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes.
Richie Allen, he's pretty funny. I listened to him the other day, and he said the mainstream media could not find they could not find an elephant with diarrhea in a snowstorm.
Boy, that's very colorful imagery right there.
Yeah, he's a funny guy, but then he gets serious too. But somebody said, I think your caller said that none of the liberals are saying anything about Gaza, people getting killed in Gaza. I think Bernie made a statement. Bernie Sanders made a statement about it. I heard he did. Anyway.
Yeah, he did, but he basically sort of couched it as, you know, the blame was equally shared. And I lost a lot of respect for Bernie Sanders at that point.
Well, he's trying to. I guess he's probably maybe he's got to run again, and he's trying to position himself a little bit to the more peaceful compared to Trump. Maybe is what he's thinking.
Well,
but I don't know. I think he probably would have been a better president as far as war. He wouldn't have.
If he had won the primary, if Hillary's people hadn't stolen the primary, I probably would have supported Bernie Sanders over Trump. Anyway, Don, got to let you go. Got to do a commercial break, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And let's see. We're going to go to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, how you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
It's kind of funny. A lot of some of these Patriot broadcasters, ever since the Mount Kilauea eruption, have become expert volcanologists without attending a day of college or seismologists.
Well,
and the thing is, Mount Kilauea has been erupting since, I think, the early 1980s.
Yeah, it's been in a state of continuous eruption. What's happening now is the eruption is intensifying, and it does go through, usually it's a very slow eruption, which is why people can safely walk on out there up to, but not over the barricades, and watch the lava flow by, because it's a very peaceful volcano mostly. But every once in a while, it does have a big eruption, and certainly this is the largest in a very long time. The ash cloud is up to 12,000 feet in altitude. There's ash falling over almost all of the Big Island now, but it's not the end of the world. It's not triggering the Ring of Fire, because we're not on the Ring of Fire. And I get a lot of emails from people who are obviously concerned about Claire and I, but again, we're not on the Big Island. We're on Oahu. We're about halfway between the part of the state that got flooded and the part that's on fire, and our home is 440 feet above sea level. We had one bad day last week where the trades had stopped, and we were getting a lot of the volcanic gases, and our eyes were stinging and so forth. But the only way we'd really be under threat is if part of that south flank of the volcano plunges into the ocean and generates a tsunami. Absent that, this volcano, we're totally safe from it.
Well, even if you have a major eruption, a big rock the size of a refrigerator is not a threat to Oahu, is it?
No, it really isn't. Although they're concerned that this imminent explosive event could hurl large boulders as much as 12 miles. So it's a serious situation for people who are living in the vicinity of the southern, or the East Rift Zone and Kilauea Crater itself. Of course, there's nothing close to Kilauea Crater itself except for Volcano House and some of the other buildings run by the United States Park Service. The nearest town to Kilauea is called Volcano, but I think they're far enough away where there shouldn't be too much. But again, we don't really know for sure. All we know is the USGS is saying something big is about to happen, and all we can do is wait and see what that is.
Well, you think the state of Hawaii has a plan B if they have to move their state capital to another island?
The state capital is here on Oahu, and it's not as high above the sea level as we are, but it's not considered to be in an inundation zone. But the inundation zones are defined based on the expected maximum of a seismic tsunami. If that entire south flank were to fall into the ocean, they're talking about a tsunami 900 feet high, and that would pretty much wipe out most of this island, except for those of us lucky enough to be living on the ridgelines. Anyway, George, I got to let you go. We got to do a station break, and we'll be back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and we're going to close the phone lines because I'm way behind on my talking points. I'm probably going to have to carry a lot of this stuff into the show tomorrow. And a reminder that the promotion involving the Front Sight Firearms Training Academy has been extended to June 2nd. I know the ad said May 5th. It's been extended to June 2nd, so you can still take advantage of this wonderful offer. And if we're living on the mainland, anywhere near Nevada, I would take advantage of this opportunity myself, because, you need to train on up for things that may be on the horizon, so to speak. Getting on back to Iran, the U.S. Navy is on alert because of Trump's pullout from the Iran deal, describing that the Gulf is now in a period of uncertainty, which it certainly is. If you look at both what Saudi Arabia and Turkey are just calling together, all of the Middle Eastern nations, and say something has to be done about this. That, of course, is going to have a negative impact on oil prices as well. Story coming on out of Russia today again, Trump's Iran gamble won't topple the Iranian regime. but it could get us into at least an economic conflict with the European Union. And again, I have to wonder about the thought processes going on inside that White House and around President Trump, where they obviously blew it. They thought when they pulled out of the Iran deal, Iran would pull out of the Iran deal, they'd have the war, and everybody would go home happy, except the people who have to fight the Iran war. And they took a chance, and they lost. And meanwhile, there's all the ancillary issues that are coming on up, where the EU wants to keep the deal with Iran. They want to keep on having trade with Iran. Bolton's over there trying to arm twist them to get out of the deal and support the U.S. sanctions. But the world is really getting sick of all these U.S. sanctions because it's causing harm to the wrong people. It's causing harm to ordinary citizens in all these countries. It's cutting them off from markets. It's cutting them off from raw materials. It's cutting them off from things they need to do what they're doing. A lot of companies in Europe were literally driven out of business by some of the anti-Russian sanctions, and they're very angry about that. And the economy of most of the European Union nations is not resilient enough to take any more sanctions. And we're starting to see this huge pushback against it. They're even talking about counter sanctions against the United States by the EU. Now, Merkel is trying to play diplomat here and say that the transatlantic ties must endure despite the dispute about Iran's nuclear program. In other words, Merkel is saying, you know, Germany and the United States, we still have to be friends. We disagree over Iran, but we still have to be friends. Which I would tend to agree with that. Whether or not it's going to happen is all about John Bolton, who seems to be causing a lot of damage every time he opens his mouth. That's the reason we're back to square one with North Korea, is he came out with this ridiculous list of demands about how North Korea had to dismantle its nuclear weapons, its centrifuges, and all the machinery that it used to make a bomb, and send it to the United States, you know, before anything nice was going to come back the other way. And that, together with the military exercises off the coast of the Korean Peninsula, basically destroyed all the progress that had been made towards some kind of peaceful resolution to this. So Bolton's big mouth is getting our country into trouble. Now, whether it's deliberate or not, I don't know. It may be. The instant North and South Korea started talking about reunification, I said, the U.S. government is going to find some way to mess this up. They don't want the Koreas reunified, because it justifies the U.S. military presence in South Korea. The other day we reported on how Great Britain is cutting the number of F-35s they're going to buy from the United States because they have gotten so expensive. So Ambassador Woody Johnson is now trying to lobby London to say that you need to spend more money on F-35s. I mean, you don't need to spend money on things like healthcare and education. You know, those really aren't all that important. You've got to have this warplane if you're going to defend yourself against Russian, Iranian, whoever aggression. So, again, it's about selling the weapons. And it's a terrible airplane. It's very expensive. It's still not combat ready. All of the F-35s currently in service are being used for training, but it's still missing a lot of its critical systems, and a lot of the systems that it does have simply do not work as advertised. It's a boondoggle by any description. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Down in Syria, the Syrian army has liberated dozens of villages in what's called the Rastan Pocket. They've reestablished control of the area east of the M5 highway in northern Homs. Militants have withdrawn from the area, and according to pro-government sources, the Syrian Arab Army and its allies are now in control of over 30 settlements located there. And the evacuation of militants from the pocket is still ongoing. Apparently yesterday, a total of 73 buses left the area. So they're basically pulling on out. They've reached a deal to just be allowed to leave. They're leaving behind their medium and heavy weapons. Apparently, they're being allowed to keep their light weapons. And, of course, the Syrian Arab Army is looking for those medium and heavy weapons, and they're finding weapons from the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. There's an article here that came out of Monthly Review. The Russians are coming again. It's talking about the first Cold War and the new Cold War. And they start off with a quote from Karl Marx that history repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce. Now, the original Cold War waged between the United States and the Soviet Union from 1945 until 1991 was a great tragedy, resulting in millions of civilian deaths in proxy wars and a destructive arms race that diverted money from social spending and nearly led to nuclear annihilation. The new Cold War between the United States and Russia is playing out as a farce, and a dangerous one at that. This claim that the Russians are coming is a red flag to restore our historical consciousness about U.S. and Russia relations, and how denying this consciousness is leading to a repetition of past follies, which of course is what the military-industrial complex wants. They hated the fall of the Soviet Union. They lost their prime enemy that they could wag at the American people to scare us into putting up with all of the vast amounts of money going into the military. And here we are again, spending vast amounts on our military, ignoring social spending or cutting it back. And the defense contractors are very happy. War is good for business, but it's only the war business. Every other business does poorly. Now, the British media is out there launching a Russia bash campaign ahead of the World Cup. And they're out there picking the grimmest things they can find about Russia, child hooligans, canine KGB death squads. And the same tactic was used during the Sochi Winter Games, where they went on out there and just bashed Russia. Don't go to Sochi. Now the new claim is don't go to the World Cup. It's petty in the extreme here. Meanwhile, British police are warning the English soccer fans not to wave the St. George's flag at the World Cup because they might find themselves targeted by Russians. So they're laying it on there with a trowel. Pro-Saudi forces have announced the start of an offensive against the last Yemeni rebel port. This is the port of Hodeidah. The Saudis have just started a military operation against it, and they intend to continue advancing north until victory is achieved. Hodeidah was the lone seaport under the control of the Shiite Houthi movement, and by extension is the only port through which humanitarian aid can flow for the entire northern half of the country. A vital humanitarian location to which pro-Saudi forces is a vital military target. Now, you need to be careful about the word rebel, because what's happening in Yemen is several years back, there was a successful U.S. intervention in Yemen. Well, I guess in hindsight, it wasn't all that successful. They kicked out the legitimate government of Yemen, and they put in a puppet ruler. The people of Yemen didn't like that puppet ruler, and they basically have kicked him out. So when they say rebel, what they mean is a Yemeni citizen who wants the right to self-determination. But the media spins it that these are rebels, because the internationally approved puppet regime is the legitimate government now. We have decided that. We couldn't leave that choice to the people of Yemen. They're really too dumb to pick a government for themselves here. So if the Saudis conquer Hodeidah, it would mean that Houthi territory, including the capital city and millions of people, will have no access to food or medical aid. And it looks like what Saudi Arabia is planning on doing is literally imposing a famine and starving the Yemeni people into accepting foreign puppet rule. Now, over in Korea, Kim Jong-un is slamming American unilateralism. It says it'll reconsider talks, but only if the U.S. is willing to negotiate. This is where Bolton's coming on out and saying, you must do all of this first before we talk, really angered them. And anybody who understands the Asian mindset would have recognized that that was horribly insulting. And like I said, it may have been deliberate. It may have been done deliberately along with those military exercises, basically to wreck North and South Korea coming closer together. And all I can assume is that somehow Moon Jae-in got snookered into allowing those military exercises to continue. Because the smart thing would have been for the South Korean fleet to go back to port to keep things calmed down as a gesture of goodwill. Getting into the domestic politics, it's starting to emerge that Trump was being set up by the Obama intelligence chiefs. This is coming from Devin Nunes, and it follows on that story that we had yesterday about how the FBI was in contact with a Russian national trying to set up an entrapment where they wanted to get Trump together with this Russian national just once so they could say that was the proof of collusion between Russia and Donald Trump. Keeping in mind that there is actually no such crime as collusion under U.S. law. So Nunes is out there saying now the Trump campaign may have been set up by the federal government back in 2016. We now know that there was a mole inside the Trump campaign. There may have been as many as 3. One of them worked for the FBI. And this is not something that the FBI is supposed to be doing. They did it back during Watergate. They got caught doing it. They got caught doing it again. Over in Robert Mueller's office, their operation is basically on the ropes. It's been a year, millions of dollars, nothing has been found. The investigation is unconstitutional, incompetent, it is illegal, it didn't follow the normal procedures specified in the special counsel law. And now Manafort's lawyers have filed a motion to basically say that they need to find out who on the grand jury that indicted Manafort was leaking to the media. And that could be a revelation that would really put a monkey wrench into Robert Mueller's gears. Mueller has not been doing really good with the court system. He's had a number of court decisions come down against him. And it comes down to 2 issues, really. The first is the absolute lack of any concrete evidence, any court-worthy evidence, and Mueller's own obvious machinations and maneuverings. And the judges are just getting tired of it. Now, Mueller has responded to this latest lawsuit by trying to shut down the investigation into the special counsel leaks. And Mueller's team has asked a federal judge in Virginia to turn down a request for a hearing on the leaks requested by Paul Manafort's lawyers. Somebody was leaking. There's leaks all over the place. It's like Washington, D.C. is just this one giant colander. Now, Mueller is apparently claiming that he obtained a secret order from a federal magistrate judge to suspend the statute of limitations on one of the charges he brought against Paul Manafort. This is in a court filing revealed Monday evening. Mueller did not inform Manafort of the secret order until after the former Trump campaign chairman had requested that charge be thrown out because the statute of limitations had expired. I question whether a judge can waive the statute of limitations. That's encoded into law. A lot of skullduggery going on over there at Mueller's office here. Another story coming on out, how former colleagues of ex-CIA Director John Brenner have now contradicted his claim that the unverified Steele dossier was not part of the U.S. intelligence community assessment on Russia's interference in the 2016 election. This is coming from real clear investigations. And apparently Brennan was feeding Obama the unverified info from the Steele dossier. Now, basically, he had said it wasn't part of it. Now 2 of his former colleagues are saying, yeah, they used that Steele dossier. The dossier was a manufactured fraud, bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. Rand Paul is out there expressing his concern that John Brennan was using British intelligence agencies to spy on Trump. Now that does happen a lot. That's what's behind the whole Five Eyes program, or Echelon. And countries will often use the intelligence services of other countries to basically give themselves plausible deniability. But Rand Paul is out there and he's saying, Gina Haspel needs to be asked the question, was she at all involved with any of the surveillance on President Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign? As deputy director of the CIA, I would presume the answer is going to be yes. I presume she'll say no, but I presume the answer would be yes. Jim Jordan, DeSantis, and Mark Meadows have now sent a letter to Trump urging the complete declassification of all the documents surrounding FISA-Gate, meaning, was that Steele dossier the only basis for the issuance of the warrant? And if it was, the warrant is invalid, which means anything collected under that warrant is inadmissible in court. But of course, what they just wanted to do was spy on Trump and his campaign and feed the information to Hillary Clinton and the DNC. They didn't care about court worthiness or not. But they lied. They absolutely lied. Representative Issa is out there saying he thinks the FBI and Department of Justice are lying through their teeth on top of the obvious stonewalling. Now, up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's a big stink. They caught a man at the airport with $1 million in cash in a carry-on suitcase. Like he thought he was going to get past TSA somehow. And it turns out there was a massive welfare swindling ring that was raising money for terrorist groups in the Middle East. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, Special Counsel Mueller's team has informed President Trump's attorneys that they've concluded they cannot indict a sitting president. All they can do is write a report. Now, they're using presidential immunity, I think, as a dodge. I don't think they found anything they could have indicted him on anyway, and they're looking for a graceful way out, a way to save face. That's what's happening over there. Story coming on out of the Political Insider. Apparently, the Clinton campaign funneled $150,000 to Hillary Clinton's personal company. And records are showing that the campaign transferred $150,000 of leftover campaign funds to a company she solely owns in the months following her election defeat. The money was sent to ZFF Holdings LLC, supposedly for the purpose of rent, according to FEC filings. But the campaign has left it unclear if it's paying at, above, or below fair market value for the office space they're supposedly renting. And the rent payments to ZFS were sent to the same address as Rory Gregorio, Clinton's personal financial manager. And this is very fishy, but not unusual for the Clintons. And it's yet another questionable action which should but will not be investigated because she didn't mean to do wrong. These things just happen. Now, the Senate Intelligence Committee has voted to endorse the confirmation of Bloody Gina Haspel as the new head of the Central Intelligence Agency. But I'm in agreement that she needs to be asked if she was involved in the spying on Donald Trump. First of all, because that's not the CIA's job. In point of fact, the way these agencies were originally set up, the FBI is supposed to be internal security and intelligence, and the CIA is supposed to operate outside the United States. They're not supposed to operate on U.S. soil. Unfortunately, both are intruding into each other's spheres of influence, as it were. But it's just another reminder of how completely out of control this government has become. The Chicago City Council, back in 2015, approved an ordinance for the housing of former President Obama's official presidential library in Jackson Park. But things have now changed. Obama plans to use the parkland to build a $500 million personal museum and monument dedicated to himself. And the National Records and Archives Administration will operate the presidential library somewhere else. So the citizens of Chicago are saying that the library was one thing, a personal shrine to Obama is quite another. And so they formed a group, Protect Our Parks Incorporated, and they filed a lawsuit against the city of Chicago and the Chicago Park District, basically saying the public parkland is prohibited by law from being given to a private entity such as the Obama Foundation for private use. Presidential library would be public. A monument to Obama is definitely private. Judicial Watch has released new Justice Department records showing there was strong support by Robert Mueller's deputy Andrew Weissman and other top Department of Justice officials for Yates' refusal to enforce President Trump's travel ban. So once again, we have all these people around Donald Trump who think they know better than he does and take it upon themselves to simply ignore his orders. But as disappointing as Trump has been for me personally, he is the elected president of the United States of America, and all those officials who work under him, he is their boss. And they can advise that they don't agree with what he's doing, but when Trump says, this is what we're doing, they're supposed to do it. DC is out of control. It's completely out of control. And part of the problem is, I've come to conclude, Donald Trump is actually a very weak leader. He's too easily swayed, too easily manipulated. He's susceptible to flattery, and that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. Looking at the economic news here, gas prices have risen to levels not seen in more than 3 years, and folks, it's probably going to get a lot worse. We're going to be looking at $4 a gallon gas very soon because of all these sanctions and all the Mideast tensions. And as we pointed out yesterday, whatever gain and benefit you might have acquired from the Trump tax plan, it's going to be eaten up with these higher prices. Ultimately, the oil companies are going to get the money, not you. Europe, as part of their upset over Iran, is going to ditch the U.S. dollar in payments for Iranian oil. And that is a big one. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsor. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking about the economic news here. And up in Seattle, there is a fight building because the Seattle government wanted to impose a new tax on corporations, and basically would come to $275 in tax for every employee. Now, corporations are already paying taxes on their employees. When you get your little pay stub and you see all the money that's deducted from your paycheck, that's not the whole story, because your employer has to pay taxes for the government's permission to hire you. But Seattle wanted to add one more, and they wanted the money, supposedly, for taking care of their huge homeless problem. And some of these corporations that are located in Seattle are fighting that. That includes Amazon, which you know has the money to pay the tax, and also Starbucks. And they've basically come on out and swinging against the Seattle Council. And I don't think they realize the optics on this. That these are very wealthy companies, very successful companies, but they're unconcerned about the homeless. Because obviously the homeless don't buy our products. And it does look bad. It does look bad. Tesla is struggling to stay in business, and they're now having to compete with $50,000 electric BMWs, which are leasing for, and I'm not kidding, $54 a month. You can lease an i3 for less than your monthly cable bill. Now, BMW is not making money on the lease. The entire electric vehicle sector is losing money hand over fist. But Tesla's now got competition out there. I mean, $54 a month, you know, even I could afford that, you know, to drive a Beamer. I do think electric vehicles are the way of the future. And when I was a kid, I was a gearhead. I rebuilt engines. I like racing cars. Okay, let's see. I have to do a message to the control room. All right. Sorry about that, but I'm just one person here. I don't have a slave off in the back room to take care of these issues for me. Speaking of homelessness, homelessness on the West Coast has reached a boiling point, and you've got people living on the streets in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle. City streets are becoming not just dangerous, but outright disgusting. There is urine and feces on the streets of San Francisco, and used needles all around as drug addicts shoot up wherever they please. Got tent cities all over the place. And you cannot look at all of this and say we have a healthy economy or an economy in recovery. It just doesn't make any sense when you have this many homeless people. And because Claire and I have worked with the hungry and homeless here in Hawaii, we know that for the most part, these are people who just got caught in the war economy. They didn't do anything. It was done to them. They're homeless really through no fault of their own. They moved on out here, went to work for a company. The company went out of business because our tourism is in decline because of TSA. Thank you, TSA, for that one. And that's going to get worse now. Apparently, tourism is declining because people are scared of the volcano, even though all of the other islands are not in danger right now. So you have to start dealing with that difference between what the government and the corporate media is telling you about the economy and what you see with your own eyes. And my advice is you got to trust your own eyes. This economy is in serious, serious trouble. It's very, very fragile. And right now, all we see coming out of Wall Street is everybody trying to grab the silver spoons and head for the door as fast as they can before it all comes apart. Over at iHeartMedia, they, again, this shows corporate greed and total insensitivity. iHeartMedia still owes artists $16.4 million, and now they want to pay itself $108 million in bonuses. Current stockholders are only going to get a 1% share. We're talking about the bankruptcy filing. The other 99% would belong to 2021 note holders and junior note holders. Private equity owners have lost their entire investment in iHeartMedia. So iHeart's compensation committee presented their 2018 key incentive plan. For running the company into the ground, CEO Bob Pittman would receive $9.3 million in bonus payments. COO Richard Bressler would get $5.3 million, and the general counsel Robert Wells would earn $900,000. And that shows you a big part of what's gone wrong with America's corporate culture. And it mimics the economy as a whole. This belief that the money should just float to the very, very top, the very tip of the pyramid, and everybody underneath, well, they're just there to lug the stones up the ramps. Venezuela, which has a lot of oil, is actually buying foreign oil to supply its Latin American allies. And people are wondering what's going on with that. But what's going on is that Venezuela is trying to keep its allies from having to become dependent on U.S. oil and with it, U.S. control. So it was a very smart move on their part. All right, we've got Ryan Dawson calling into the show right now. So Ryan, are you there?
Oh, yeah, long time no see.
Long time no hear from. What's going on?
Mike. It's just hard with the time zones and the kids I keep making, so it makes it harder on my schedule.
Well, Claire says send pictures of the kids.
Oh, I will. I know she's a fan. But don't share them. You were talking about the torture baroness earlier of the CIA, and I think she should get a Nobel Peace Prize because that would be fitting with other past contenders for that. And like Henry Kissinger and Obama, the more people you murder and torture, the better chances you have at a Peace Prize. So I think she's perfect for the nomination. She's got all this experience in torture, so isn't that a job credential?
Yes, it's a sterling recommendation for a Nobel Peace Prize.
I'm sure you saw what happened with Ray McGovern, yes?
Oh, absolutely. I was so disgusted with that. We're still trying to get him onto the show here, but he's making the rounds of the media. By treating him like that, they have made him, once again, into a celebrity, and they've given him a lot of exposure, which probably was not well thought out. I think they would have rather that nobody talked to Ray McGovern, but when they threw this 78-year-old man onto the ground and broke his hand, they made him an instant celebrity.
Dislocated his arm. And did you see how the cops kept saying, stop resisting, stop resisting? He wasn't doing anything. And it's all on film. Yes. And this smug little torture baroness, she's just up there like, throw him out in the back. They take him out in the back, not knowing, someone followed him out there with a camera. Then they throw him on the floor, dislocate his arm, and there's like 5 or 6 cops on a 78-year-old man who's not resisting. But what bothered me is, why is Ray out there by himself? Where's all the youth? Why weren't younger people also at the confirmation hearing to protest?
Well, I imagine that it was a very hot
time on Facebook and so on.
I think it was a very hot ticket, and people couldn't get on in, and probably the audience was preloaded with Haspel supporters, and McGovern had no choice but to go in alone, and he was a very brave man for doing just that.
It's happened before when he turned his back on Hillary. Yep. Government thugs attacked him again. I'll tell him to come on your show. I think sure he'd be happy to do so. He's busy doing the rounds right now. That was utterly disgusting. Switching topics, did you see in North Korea, they asked the U.S. one thing. They said, don't do one thing. Don't bring any kind of aircraft that can carry nuclear bombs right up to our border. So what did they do? That.
Yeah.
It's like there's a deal shoved right in Trump's lap, and he said, no, I want more. I don't know what to do anymore.
Well, it's very obvious that the U.S. government did not want the Koreas moving together, and when Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un started talking nice to each other, I said the U.S. government is going to find some way to screw this up, and between Bolton's ridiculous demands, that warplane that you're talking about, and the military exercises off the coast, they wanted to sabotage any possibility of there being a peaceful resolution of this.
John Bolton is repugnant, and they bring in John Bolton, and then shortly after gave a pardon to Louis Libby. And then they not only moved the embassy in Jerusalem, but they decided to do it on the same day as the anniversary of the Nakba, knowing how much that's going to infuriate people.
Yes.
Then they murder people for getting too close to the cage walls, including an 8-month-old baby that they gassed with a drone that flew over and dropped tear gas in there. And you can see all the Hasbara making excuses for it. But I think they've bitten off more than they can chew.
I agree with this one. World condemnation is intense, and I've been equating the Bloody Monday massacre with the Amritsar massacre in India, which was the turning point where Britain started to lose control over the subcontinent, leading to Indian independence.
That's a good comparison.
Okay, anything else?
It just doesn't seem to matter. Yeah, it just doesn't seem to matter when Israelis can burn babies in their houses and they only get 10 months detention, and they can shoot these people with impunity. But the really striking difference is now it's on film because Palestinians have cell phones and they can upload these things to Twitter. But they are cracking down on the internet. I've been banned from Facebook since Christmas, just consecutive 30-day bans for nothing. I had my Twitter blocked. I had my YouTube taken down and then restored after a month and a half. So they are trying to crack down on the internet, and that's why people have to support RBN and independent stations like that. And I'll have some news for you about the Lost Colony in a few days, but I promise to stay in touch more and to call in more often now.
I would
Keep up the
appreciate
good work,
that
Mike.
greatly. I would appreciate that greatly. I don't even bother with Twitter and Facebook anymore. I don't even remember the last time I logged in there, and I'm overusing some of the newer platforms. Obviously, I put most of what I'm talking about and thinking about on the whatreallyhappened.com website, and our numbers are way up. So people are coming here. The word is spreading. The readers are telling other readers, and we're starting to reach a sizable audience now. At the same time that corporate media is in serious trouble, as illustrated by the story about iHeartMedia's downfall.
Yeah, my numbers are up too, and you can see them discredit themselves because they had all the Hazara on there trying to blame Hamas, trying to blame the victims. It's like blaming a rape victim because of what she was wearing or whatever. And every time they do that, they discredit themselves. People get disgusted, and then they find sites like yours or any alternative to the fake news. So, if Trump could only do his rhetoric instead of being manipulated by the Kushners, but we have what we have, and it's still better than Hillary.
Yes, I'll agree with you on that last part. All right, well, Ryan, thanks an awful lot, and don't forget those pictures of the little ones for Claire. And
I'll do it right now.
Thank you for calling in.
No problem.
All right. Getting on back to the economic news, right now, 21% of Americans have no retirement savings at all. And that is a very bad situation to be in, especially when you realize that the pensions are defunded. They may not be able to meet their obligations to American workers. Social Security is in trouble. The money's just all been siphoned off for the war. And it's interesting. George Carlin, in his monologue about the American dream, he predicted they're going to come for your retirement money. They want it all. They're money junkies. They're addicts. It doesn't matter how much they've got. They live for that thrill of getting more by hook or by crook, mostly by crook. And our nation is being impoverished between the military-industrial complex and just flat-out corporate greed, as illustrated by that story about iHeartMedia. It's an unstable situation. And at some point, there's going to be a crisis. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog saying it all. The total debt outstanding in the U.S. has reached unsustainable heights. And prices and rents are going up, wages and salaries are going down. Now the Fed is talking about raising interest rates. Talk about being caught between the rock and the hard place. Now, over in Hungary, George Soros Open Society Foundation has officially ended all of their operations. Hungary passed a law basically banning these non-governmental organizations from operating inside the country, pushing the agenda of the open borders. Soros called the law repressive. And so he's taking his Open Society Foundation and leaving in a huff. Don't let the door hit you on the rear end on your way out there, George. Over in the United Kingdom, there's a new wrinkle in the withdrawal bill, or Brexit. Apparently, the Scottish Parliament has voted against giving consent to the Brexit. They want to stay part of the European Union. And probably the British government is now wishing they hadn't rigged that Scottish independence referendum a few years back, because today Scotland would be an independent country and they could stay in the EU and Britain could go its own way. Another fine example of unintended consequences. Getting on back to Hungary, both Hungary and Poland are really digging in their heels about the refugee quota, saying that we will decide who enters our countries, not Brussels. So there's going to be a confrontation there as well. Up in Finland, studies are showing that 93% of migrant sex crimes are committed by migrants from the Islamic countries. So how's that open borders thing working out for you? Okay, we're going to take another break for commercials here, and when we come on back, it'll be the last segment of our program today, and I am going to have to take a lot of these stories into the talking points for the show tomorrow. So we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha America, welcome back to our program, last segment of our show today. And apparently, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in has ordered a significant scaling back of the military exercises taking place off the coast of the peninsula. So he's trying to sort of make amends and prove to North Korea that he's really serious about trying to get together. And how Kim Jong-un is going to react, we don't know. But Bolton provoked him, as Ryan Dawson pointed out. Flying that nuclear-capable aircraft right up to their border provoked them. So at this point, it's very obvious the United States does not want to see a reconciliation. They didn't 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the Koreas were talking about reunifying, and the U.S. stepped in and mucked it up back then. Okay, one of the articles we put up on whatreallyhappened.com today, this is from Business Insider, citing the 10 professions with the most psychopaths in them. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier that so many of our government and corporate leaders do fit the classic definition of a psychopath. They make snap decisions, often not carefully thinking out. They have absolutely no empathy for anybody else around them. They have an inflated sense of themselves and a knack for manipulating other people. But because they look like ordinary people, they're not the raving, knife-wielding lunatics that movies depict psychopaths as. It's really very hard to pick them out until they reveal themselves with their behavior. And I'm not going to go down the list of professions, but obviously they seek positions of wealth and power, and they're utterly ruthless in getting there. And that's why you can have a company like iHeartMedia, which owes artists so much money in the middle of their bankruptcy, and they want to give themselves huge bonuses. It's absolutely shameful. Absolutely shameful. Up in Billings, Montana, apparently they've identified 3 police officers who were caught having sex on duty in public property, city property, which I guess is probably preferential to them being out breaking somebody's arm or shooting some innocent person. But it's inappropriate behavior. Over in Chicago, the problem got a little bit worse. One of their police officers has admitted to having sex with a 14-year-old and 3 other girls. He's looking at 10 years in jail, as well he should. And if he goes to jail, he's going to have a rough time, because in prison, there's actually a social hierarchy depending upon the crime that you were convicted of. And child molesters are at the very, very bottom. Now, story coming here, apparently police launched a SWAT attack into a home on the suspicion there was a drug ring inside. There was a teenager who thought the home was being broken into by burglars and tried to defend his home with a gun. When he realized they were police, he immediately surrendered. The police found 1 ounce of marijuana, a misdemeanor, but they're charging the teenager with attempted capital murder. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and take Claire down to the doctor place. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure that he has got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and on the whatreallyhappened.com website share them around, talk to people, use email lists. Don't even bother with Facebook, Twitter, or Google. They're a complete waste of time these days. So we'll see you tomorrow. Aloha, America.